So here we are, coming into the very tail end of the God Kings. This is turn 9, we got 2 turns left. But it feels like we're in that end game period, where there's not a lot that can be done, where Egypt has the game pretty much sealed off. But maybe, just maybe, Babylon, or even one of the others, could surpass them. Now, what do we have? Well, starting on this turn, we're going to have Ramses II for Egypt, who's really, obviously, a good leader. We all know his name because he's on condoms and everything. And then we have someone I can't read, Muwatalli II, for the Hittites. I'm not familiar with that name. The Hittites probably aren't going to be too much in competition with anyone here. Well, I mean, they're going to be gaining at other people's expense, but they're not really able to do too much against Egypt. Although they have cut a deal with the Assyrians saying, hey, I get Mitanni, which they failed last turn, and then we kind of work together, maybe against the Babylonians, maybe against Egypt, whatever, but we're not going to compete with each other because we're both in trouble. And then we've got a fairly good leader coming in for the Assyrians as well, an improvement over whatever they have here, who we can just pluck away and replace as we go. Doing that with all of them, really. And, yep, even the Babylonians are losing their king. Now theirs is degrading, and in fact, the king they never got last turn is disappearing as well. Alright, well, looking at the points that were produced, poor Egypt's been dropped so far. 5 tribute, 6 wood. They're going to pay a wood to the Hatti. They think overall making the Hatti stronger can only help them. And that gives the Hatti 7 chariots potentially. Hey, we'll take them, man, you know, no problem. Even if it's actually the Egyptians who are mainly going to be paying the penalty to the Hittites here, there's still the feeling that Hittite armies aren't going to be touching Egyptian armies. If they are going to come into conflict, they're going to come into conflict with the Assyrians, who have a decent amount of points and are something of a mild threat to the Egyptians, or to the Babylonians, who are a serious threat along their border and may actually be fighting them. We'll see where it all turns out, though, because my feeling is that actually the Babylonians are going to be fighting the other non-Egyptian players more over maybe some of the remains of the Egyptian Empire in the north, but also trying to defend themselves. They're the area that has to be expanded into. Now, they would love to get some sort of agreement and be able to just march down through Amaru and finally take that. And maybe fight over Canaan and be able to push the Egyptians there. But it looks to me like that's just not going to happen. Fast out the cards, I got to build the actual troops and decide where to set things up. So things seem to have lined up in a strictly anti-Sumerian alliance between the Hatti and the Assyrians. The Assyrians positioning themselves to grab Mari, the Hatti positioning to grab Mitanni, and they're also going to try to grab the Egyptian territories and then move into Ugarit. What did the Sumerians do, or Babylonians do, who were the first of all? Well, they positioned themselves in mostly what looks like an anti-Egyptian stance. And of course the Egyptians were forced to position themselves back near home in order to regain Canaan. Well, we'll see how it all works out. Okay, well, the Kassites opened things off with favor of Marduk. This is a major campaign, allows them to move 3 of their generals, and they quickly swung out, attacking Tyre, Kadesh, and Carchemish all at once. These all get sieges because there's no defense. So let's start with Tyre. All they really need is a 4 or higher. There's nothing, well, that one's not going to work. There's nothing that can modify this. This one, they need a 5 because it's a single city. And this is going to make things kind of difficult. They were hoping to grab Tyre there cheaply because some of the others are going to be harder. This one also, they just get a continuing siege. And of course, these could be threatened. And this is a double, so it's actually at -2 for the walls. And they don't take that either. they're going to need a card to trigger each siege event from now on. And that could be a danger because of the Egyptians coming up. They need to take these quickly before other things start falling. And that's going to happen pretty soon, I think. So fleshing out this first round, what do we have happened? Well, the Egyptians slid into the Canaan and started a siege of their own, which hadn't succeeded. The Hatti played, finally, the army reforms, and they gained the Patasa army, which means Patasa is now part of Hatti, essentially. The extra tribute point, or victory point or whatever, it's actually a victory point according to here, but it says add the tribute value. I don't know what they're talking about. I gotta look at this stupid rule that I just saw. Hatti restrictions, its tribute value is added to the Hatti Empire. Well, there is no tribute value. I'm adding the victory point value because that's the only thing that makes any sense. Anyway, it essentially has become part of this province, which means all the penalties and advantages of a home territory accrue to it. And the biggest thing is that gives him a division to slide down and take Mukish province with, as well as Ishua. Meanwhile, we've got him in place to deal with Mitanni. And finally, the Assyrians played their own minor campaign. 2 generals. They slid down 1, 2, 3 to start taking parts of Babylonia. No real advantage here unless they can actually conquer the whole of it. That's pretty hard to do in one turn. It's a rich, heavily fortified area. But, you know, I don't think they even want to do it. I think instead they're going to do this. 1, 2, 3. Give them the chariots, and then they can come down 4, 5. No, not those chariots. Their own 4 or 5 and come down. They just gain an extra territory. You know, I just don't see the advantage of splitting up at this point in the game. It's a damage division, and they can just keep pushing forward into the Mari area because they're not going to gain this. Hurting the Babylonians, no big deal. The Babylonians are going to take enough damage. They don't need to drive them down. The only thing they would consider is, could they cut through to Sumer? Well, they're better off with the full army to face the Babylonian army. Alright, well that's it. We're on to the second round. Oh man, I screwed up with the Egyptians. I'm noticing on their first turn, it went 1, 2, 3 and then sieged. They didn't need to siege at all. This was already, it's an empty territory, so they could have just gone 1, 2, 3, 4 and taken that. They don't need to siege. Anyway, I'm on the second round. The Kassites have already gone, and they failed to do a siege against the Egyptians up here. Everywhere else, they've also got sieges going. So the Egyptians continued moving up through Canaan, made it to Megiddo, and made an attack on Tyre, but the Kassites had an ill omen card, canceled the attack, and drove Ramses back. Now on to the lesser half. And the Hatti pushed forward through the mountainous terrain, grabbing their last territory in Ishua, giving them the points there, and into Mukish, where they're going to continue grabbing Egyptian territory. Up here, the Assyrians have completed taking Mari, successful siege, as well as capturing this. And that puts us into the third round. And the Kassites tried to slip a siege in success at Tyre. They didn't get it this time. And then we had the Egyptians actually move in. They ran to Jericho first, grabbed control of that, and then moved up. Attacked at Tyre. Babylonians couldn't get out of the way. The chariot charge, 20-point chariot charge, cut more than half the strength of that Kassite force just out of nowhere. And the Kassites ended up doing 2 points of damage to the overall Egyptian army for being wiped out. No big cost there at all for the Egyptians. And now they're just moving up, and they're going to grab Kadesh, relieve Kadesh next. It's going to be really, really easy for them to sort of clear the way here. The only problem they have is they can't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're going to have to go 1, 2, 3, 4. Actually, they're going to have to go up this way, which means they have to spend an extra movement point at some point to get one of these territories in Kadesh, I think, because they need 4 to control it. But yeah, they've basically demolished the Babylonians' chance of getting their card off that was going to give them extra victory points. Alright, onward. And then working our way to the tail end of the turn, the Hatti grabbed this with a 2-point card, just taking the 2 PCs. They could have moved down. But then, what we have here is the Assyrians marched through from Mari, capturing the territory, destroyed another Kassite force. And we're seeing here why you do not want to split your forces up. Weak forces do very, very poorly in this because you can basically mass your entire army. So the much smaller Assyrian army, smaller than the Babylonian whole army, is able to take out 1 division, just like the Egyptians were able to take out 1 division. If you don't mass your whole army against someone, you're probably going to lose if they do. So this is really one of those games with one big stack of units, as we've seen so far. Anyway, the Assyrians are set up to siege Carchemish. They'll get it if they win the siege. They'll get the province, but they can't actually roll the die this turn. And we move on to the 4th round. Well, crap. Looks like my attack on Carchemish was completely wrong. And I should have a whole division back here with the king. It was the king who was there. And I just got myself confused. So we're going to have a real battle instead. And I think we got 2 of these sitting there. I was trying to free him up to take things. So I'll do the do-over here. This was in the Assyrian turn anyway. I don't think they're going to hold up well. I think the Assyrians are in trouble because there's a lot there. Okay, well, the results weren't all that different. The Assyrians still won. They did 24 points of damage to 19 that was done to them. They chose to do more damage than not. The Babylonians chose to retreat back to Washukani in the middle of the Hatti area, which is probably going to end up getting them attacked again. And the Assyrians end up able to lay siege to Haran. But this is, again, it's opening things up. The Egyptians are getting freed again. They're not being stopped. They're not being stomped. And they're going to walk away with the victory because of it, basically. Anyway, this retreat is fine because it goes through an empty space. It's not an enemy space. Heavy losses on both sides. And people really need to come together and defeat the enemy that they need to defeat. We'll see if they can come to some sort of deal. I'm going to load this one up back to the beginning of round 4.